I'm Andy Ely, Senior Funeral Director for G Seller Independent Funeral Directors, and we've been serving bereaved families since 1910. I'm sure you're all well aware there's lots of different myths, taboos and misconceptions around what happens behind the scenes within the funeral profession. So we decided to put together this series of podcasts to answer those questions and hopefully dispel those myths. So please do like, share and subscribe, and send those questions, send them to liftingthelid@gseller.co.uk, and we will do our absolute best to answer them for you. It genuinely is our family caring for your family. Welcome to today's episode of Lifting the Lid. Today's episode is about grief in the classroom, and I'm joined by Mark Boast of the Hinckley School. How are you, Mark?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you for being in that hot seat.
Well, I feel relatively comfortable.
Good. Mark, head teacher, assistant head teacher at the Hinckley School. Tell me a bit about your story.
You just promoted me, so thank you very much.
There you go.
Well, I am assistant head teacher, but I have been in that building for a long time. So
Okay.
I'm currently in my 27th year.
Okay, at the same school. Wow.
I came away, so you might notice from my accent, I'm not a local to the Midlands.
Okay.
So I hail from East Suffolk, so right on the coastline over there, and I escaped Suffolk. Not that I don't love it, because I do, but I escaped Suffolk in the early 90s and got on a train over to Leicester to go to university there, where I studied biology.
Okay.
And I got my degree there. And I thought, one of those things, come to the end of my degree, and I wasn't 100% certain where I wanted to go. I'd done lots of different things during that time, but I thought, okay, I'll do a teaching qualification. And I saw an advert for a school in Hinckley.
Okay.
And that, at the time, obviously being 27 years ago, was the John Cleveland College. So the legendary.
I remember it, yeah. And JCC, as it was always
exactly.
known, yeah.
And they were kind enough, or maybe foolish enough, to give me a job.
Okay.
And I was very young. I was just 24 years old then. And I've been there ever since. But obviously the school has changed an awful lot in that time. It's gone through many manifestations.
Yeah.
So from JCC to the Hinckley Academy and John Cleveland Sixth Form Centre, very long title there. And then obviously now to the Hinckley School. But in that time, I've done so many different roles and been obviously involved with the education and working with thousands of students across this area, which I'm proud to say that I've done that. Still in contact with a lot of them, which is excellent. Teach some of the children of quite a lot of them as well. And now, yes, as you say, I'm assistant head teacher at the Hinckley School, and I'm responsible for, I teach biology, I teach science.
Okay, yeah.
So I still do that. That's the bread and butter. But on top of that, as part of my role, I lead on personal development and careers across the school.
Okay.
So amongst that is obviously looking at, in terms of personal development, is how we look at, even sometimes issues like grief and relationships and all the many myriad of things that are thrown at young people in today's world.
Absolutely. So we want to touch on all aspects of grief. It's so different for different people.
Yeah.
The journey, the grief journey is complete. I mean, we've spoken to Tracy, one of my colleagues. It's vastly different, and being such a big part of that community, how does that work in the classroom? How does it affect you?
Personally, oh crikey, what, grief in general?
Yeah, it's a huge question.
Yeah.
And totally off key as well.
No, it's fine. I don't know. It's kind of I think over those years of working in a school, being in that privileged position to work with adults, teachers, but and other support staff, but also parents, obviously, and obviously the young people themselves. There is going to be somebody at some point that's grieving in your community.
A huge part of that community.
And because you're working with thousands of people, and you get to understand that the way in which that affects people is so different, and because you witness it. So the way, and you can't generalize Just because a person is young doesn't mean they're not going to be able to cope with grief very well. And just because a person's older, no, even an adult, one of myself, I can talk about my own experiences of that, but as an adult, that doesn't mean you're going to deal with the grief any better. So
Absolutely.
everybody is different, and this is what I've come to realize and also the nature of where that grief has come from. Would lead to a different response from the person, but also in the support that we'd need to have to offer within the school community as well.
Okay, we're going to touch on that in a moment,
Yeah.
if that's okay. Do you think more pupils actually suffer with grief more so than meets the eye? Perhaps hide it. I know as a child myself, I would have hidden everything, and
And I'm the opposite. So
Okay.
people pretty much know what I am thinking and feeling most of the time because
Okay.
it just comes out of my mouth. That is, I think, what we need to do within our school community is just, we do offer. No, I'm proud to say that we offer wraparound care to the kids. We have a community spirit, and that's been recognised by the kids themselves. Will tell you that.
Okay.
But it's about creating an environment where they feel willing to share that information with you if they want to.
Okay.
And they often will because they feel part of the community and they have a very close relationship with their pastoral teams. They have a tutor, they have pastoral leaders,
Yep.
and they would therefore not necessarily. I wouldn't say people are. The level of grief I suspect will be as it always has been. Do we find out more about it now? Maybe in some ways because people are maybe more knowledgeable and kids have access to more on things online about, they'd be able to see that. Back in the day, where would I find out information
Yeah.
about dealing with grief? I might have to go to a library and find a book. Nowadays, everything's on the internet. They have access to things that we didn't have access to. So, but that's also in terms of the support mechanisms as well for students because, I myself, I have experience of grief myself. I've
Yeah.
witnessed it, but I'm not an expert in grief. So therefore, if a student comes to me and they are expressing something in terms that obviously I can empathise, but I'm not an expert. So I always see that our role and my role specifically is to support that child and make them feel, that they have somebody to talk to, but also I would signpost them to a professional, if they
Okay.
need that help.
Is this something that all the teachers are capable of doing, or do you have specific teachers? There is a particular bereavement team.
There is no specific bereavement team, but we do have within every school now. There's always going to be a wider safeguarding team that's looking
Yeah.
out for the kids.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Every teacher's role is safeguarding those children, and I would say that we will signpost the kids to the support that they need, but that will be different for each kid. So we're saying, some kids will need a lot of support, and others will need less so, and a lot of that depends on what they experience at home as well. If a kid has a very supportive home environment where they share information and they have access to services, that would be different to a student who doesn't have that. And we'd obviously put things into place for them. We give them access to, we have in-person counselling, we have access to online services, mental health first aid workers,
Yeah.
but not necessarily. There's no particular bereavement team, no, because we have a kind of an encompassing, supportive pastoral system, and because now our school runs from, we have a 7-year. We talk about our 7-year journey.
Okay.
So our plan always is, or would always be, for a student to join us in year 7 when they're 11 years old, and then stay all the way through, if they wish to, all the way through to year 13 in the
Yeah, it
sixth
has
form.
changed, hasn't it?
It has changed, and you get to know people very well,
bet,
and you get to
yeah.
support them. You get to know the families very well, and you get to know what the needs of those people are, and because they get to know you very well, and that's not just the teachers, but the wider teams of people, they're more likely to share. So our students suffering from more grief, probably not, but they might be more likely to express it, which would be good, because then that means that we'd be more likely to offer, direct them to better support to deal with their grief. But also in the wider context, sometimes those kinds of things expose more support for the family as well,
Yeah.
and we are an educational establishment. No, no teacher is trained. When you go to teacher training college or at university, nobody is trained in counselling or management of grief. Even though I suppose you should suspect you're going to have to sort of participate or experience that through your time as a teacher. But what we do is ensure that we create that environment for the kids that they feel safe.
How do you create that environment? That's interesting. I'm just thinking back, because this sounds like this has changed so much since back in the dark ages when I was at school.
It wasn't that long ago, sure.
Oh yeah. It was long enough.
You be careful what you say,
remember.
because I was probably teaching when you were at school.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't put a number on it, but I do remember. It's probably my first contact with grief.
Yeah.
So a good friend of mine killed in a car crash.
Yeah.
Okay. From my recollection, absolutely no support whatsoever from the school. Not being derogatory to said school.
No.
It might be my memory blocking it out. It might be perhaps I wasn't close enough. I don't know, but it sounds totally different now. So I guess my question: how have you done that?
I think, because I've been teaching, I can sort of empathise, more than empathise, I can see what you're talking about, because obviously I've worked not in this particular school, because it's so different now as the Hinkley School for back in the day as John Cleveland College. But schools have changed, full stop. So if you look at the education system has changed so much. Mm-hmm. So schools are not necessarily expected, but do, because we see our job as being, supporting our young people in whatever way we possibly can. Schools have become a place where more access to services have actually appeared, I suppose. So we do offer, as I said, we offer counselling services to students, but we also extend that to the parents as well. So schools are becoming far more of a community hub, I guess, if anything. Okay. So one thing I would say, this is something, we work very closely with the Hinkley and Bosworth Borough Council.
Yeah. And
it's in its infancy actually at this moment in time, but we are actually creating ourselves as a community hub for services, so that things like, if we have the situation where a student required counselling for whatever means, but say bereavement counselling, there was need for the parents as well to access services, they'll be able to do that through the school. So it is different, because we're becoming far more of a focal point for support to families, because it's just a role that we feel that we can help out in terms of creating a caring, supportive environment. We have amazing staff, so not only our teachers, but the supportive pastoral staff that work day in, day out. Those people are often not teachers, so they're on hand all the time, and they're dealing with the day-to-day things that aren't necessarily the educational things that we're dealing with in terms of learning with the teaching staff, but also we have safeguarding staff as well. So those things it was sort of back in the dark ages, it was a bit more ad hoc, whereas nowadays I think it's far more structured to ensure that you will hear about safeguarding being mentioned in the news all the time. So we are constantly trying to ensure that those children are safe at all times. Now, the reach outside of school is obviously you're limited to what you do, but we are also what goes on outside of school often comes into school, so they'll tell us what's happening, so we can look out for them, and that's why they become to feel part of that community and will share with you and feel safe, because it is an environment where they know that they'll be looked after.
I guess it's sort of society in general now, isn't it? Everyone's more aware of everything.
Yeah, and you're right. In terms of your experience at school with having a friend who passes away, the most, as I said, the experience of grief throughout school is far-reaching. I've been there for 27 years, so you would expect, for working in a school for that period of time, I will have experienced death. I've experienced the passing of both of my parents in that time.
Okay.
I've experienced the loss of colleagues through illness or through accident. I've and the most traumatic thing, of course, is being in a school setting when a student dies, through whatever reason. But it does affect, what I've seen and observed, it does tend to affect often not the grief process, but what actually happens within the school. There's always a supportive, if a student dies, there's a massive support network.
Is that support for you as well as the students?
Oh, no, definitely. We're all given access to the same.
Okay.
So any services that are available to a student would be available to teachers as well. But say, we've had students obviously pass away through illness, through accident, and the most traumatic, I suppose, is through suicide. But thankfully, those occasions over the 27 years have been very, very scarce. But as I was talking to one of your colleagues earlier on about the fact that, even so, having worked here for so long, and I have kept in contact with a lot of students over the years, and I see them, and they're also, a lot of them are parents of the kids I teach. Yeah. So when you become part of that big community and you see people, obviously, again, sadly, I've had students that I have taught in the past who subsequently, since leaving school, have passed away. Yeah. So, and it still has an effect on you because you have a bond when you spend a lot of time with children, back at JCC, back in those days, it was a 2, maybe 4 year process. Yeah. But now, a teacher potentially could teach a child for 7 years.
Yeah, that's a long time.
And they could be a tutor of that child, and so they spend a lot of time together. And you do, and you have a kind of, you become a person you become a feature in that person's life, whether you like it or not, you do.
We've got our bereavement care team.
Yep.
That look after the families that we have the privilege of supporting for the funeral.
Yeah.
The level of aftercare doesn't stop as the funeral finishes. We want to carry on and support that family. But there's kind of the precursor to it as well, and exploring and putting that level of care into schools and helping support you as teachers, support the students, the pupils. What are your thoughts there? Do you think that's something that would assist you? So take perhaps that stress of having to do it yourselves?
Schools are always, stress. Schools are always happy to take support from external agencies or external groups of people, especially if they're in a position where they're very qualified to do that. I think it's more about, I'm not saying that we don't touch on grief in the stuff that we do, because what the children have to understand is that this is something you are going to experience,
For staff as well, clearly would suffer bereavement as well.
Yeah.
What's the level of support from your perspective as teachers? Do you support one another? Is there a level of care there?
Definitely. And one thing I would say is that one thing you never suffer with as a teacher is solitude. You're never on your own. And sometimes I crave to be on my own, but I'm not often on my own because you have hundreds of people around. But this is another thing, and that I've always worked as a teacher, so you don't really get, sometimes, and COVID was a good example when that whole thing's taken away from you, that community thing, when you have all these people around you all the time. So you don't realise how important having a large group around you can be as an individual, as an adult, but also that must be the same thing for young people as well.
Brilliant. Just going back onto the classroom, onto the pupils, that need for privacy alongside creating that supportive environment, how do you balance that? Are there any specific challenges, any misconceptions about grief? You've got such a cross-section of ages there. I'm sure it would vary.
Yeah, I say you can't generalise how grief is going to affect somebody. So we tend to work on a need to know basis. As I say, this is, in terms of privacy, if somebody passed, not every member of that school community needs to know if somebody's passed away. So it's the conversation you have with the person who is in that position of grief. There are people that need to know. Okay. The people that are directly supporting that child, they need to know. but also in terms of wider knowledge of what somebody's going through. No, you wouldn't share that, you know.
Brilliant. Absolutely phenomenal amount of information there. Your support, the level of care that you as a school give your pupils and each other, from the sounds of things.
Yeah, and the community. So it's becoming even far more outreaching, and this is something we pride ourselves on, and I think it'll become even more so as the school goes through multiple 7-year journeys with these children.
Yeah, and you can't start again.
And let's say this is the big change for us in terms of, you know, you have that connection with a family for a long period of time.
So I think it's something we can absolutely help with the future, with the bereavement care, the support from our colleagues, just to help support you and support that community, that wider picture.
I suppose the thing is, you know, in Hinckley, for especially, you know, on most occasions when there's been a bereavement, and which I've been involved with, it would be your company, obviously being in the centre of Hinckley, that many of those occasions that I've attended, you know, it's been through your services. Yeah, and I suppose it does make, and one thing I found very interesting actually was I'm out on the rounds doing promotion for school.
Okay.
So obviously the Hinckley Sixth Form is the best sixth form in the area.
Okay, good plug there.
Yeah, good plug there that everybody needs to go to. And when we are promoting and going around, we obviously are often at fairs, and we see employers there. We have now started to see sellers there as an employer,
Absolutely.
which I think is a really interesting in terms of, with my different hat on, in terms of careers, just highlighting to students what the opportunities are in different sectors. And I don't think we would have seen that before. I don't think, and apart from the last couple of years, I don't think I ever would have seen an undertaker going into careers fairs promoting. But no, it's essential.
Yeah,
now, these are
something that we are trying. It's same for this podcast. Raise awareness. It's not a taboo. It's not hidden. There's nothing sinister. People have to be involved with it. So we want to share it, basically.
Yeah, and this is, and as I say, if we're trying to, the conversation, when you talk about learning about grief in schools and, you know, potential for people putting it into a curriculum, it's like any of these topics that are often deemed as being sensitive. They're often the ones that people don't talk about a lot.
Yeah.
And oracy and talking is the foundation to all of the learning. So we get people talking about everything, contentious issues especially. There's nothing better than have a good debate about something.
Yeah, that's true.
So so we want people to be talking about these issues. So if they see at a careers fair an undertaker, they're more likely to have a conversation with somebody about, why are they here, and what do they do? And also then, if you are, you know, if the conversations emerge about grief and people are expressing what their thoughts are about it, not only do you have the opportunity to sort of inadvertently support people, I guess, but also you can address misconceptions about things.
Mark, this is brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
That's all right.
Brilliant insight there into the support that you give, the support that you receive. I personally feel that we could expand that, and we'd love to be part of that.
No,
but thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
So yeah, please do like, share, subscribe. Any questions, please email them to liftingthelid@gseller.co.uk. We'll do our best to answer them for you, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thank you,
Mark.